A pair of steeled, yet wary eyes peeked over through a pair of high-tech binoculars, scanning the streets and alleyways amongst the buildings for any signs of hostiles. Ace led prone on the roof, just barely poking over its edge to give him a direct view of the street below. Last thing Lincoln remembered before he went to sleep that night was reading an old Ace Savvy issue. While he was aware of much of his dreams were different from the real thing, it still felt as if he was living in a different parallel of his own. And as uncomfortable as it was, he eventually decided it was just best just to roll with it, than to waste time questioning it. To most of the citizens, the pitch blackness of the streets, having the lampposts, was the only source of illumination, along with the eerie quietness, and would make them extremely cautious at the possibility of getting robbed, kidnapped, murdered, or just even having a little nice beatdown after too many drinks. Ace Savvy was used to all those, knowing a few criminals would risk doing anything in broad daylight as to make things easier targets. Plus, he had had the displeasure of breaking up fights by subduing to the brawlers. Many of the times he had taken these nights on the stride, waiting for these violators of the law to show themselves so they can face justice. But tonight was going to be anything but ordinary. Wildcard Willie had planned a heist for sure, and it wasn't a bank robbery or a jewel job he would typically do. One-Eyed Jack had traced him to his lumber factory just outside of the residential area. What Willie would need a bunch of wood was anyone's guess, but that wasn't what was occupied Ace's focus right now. Instead, he was looking over for any of his former team, the Full House gang. The boy knew his sisters enough that they would take any reported tips on potential crimes seriously, especially if they involve one of their arch nemesis, without the guidance. However, Ace couldn't wonder if they picked up the same after Jack did. The two of them were typically the guys who had found themselves foes were up to running management, or co-management. He wasn't dire to look up any one mantle after being ousted. She would have used the sensors or whatever high-tech equipment to achieve the same effect, which was something Ace secretly frowned upon. Not that the 4-year-old's gadgets were useful, but they couldn't beat the old-fashioned ingenuity and tracking in this opinion, especially if one to find the way to jam the electronics. Looking up from his binoculars, Ace peered down from across the rooftops, spotting Deuce and Mad Bomber not too far from his left. To his right, he saw Wrangler, Mirage, and Jack on another. Likely conversation with themselves. Given a little more movement, he had split them into two small teams with the help of the element of surprise, to which it earned him a few suggestive teases, given who he was aware was double-edged approached. Keeping out of sight was one thing, but if someone from the Full House stumbled upon his or his friend's position, getting to them would take them and open the possibility of allies being baited into a trap. A shiver ran up Ace's spine as he started to feel precautious about his own position. Noting the distance he had between the two other groups, hearing a set of footballs behind him, the boy tensed up his shoulders as he whipped his head around. He gave a light sigh of relief upon seeing Ace Assassin climbing onto the roof. "Did you see anything?" "Sort of. I saw that old van you guys used a few blocks away, but I don't know where they took off to," Sharpshooter replied before she kneeled down next to him. Ace huffled slightly, looking back through the optics. "At least we know they're here." "This is so boring. Can we go yet?" came the annoyed voice of a certain demologist on the radio. "Shut up!" Deuce's voice followed in a sharp whisper. "Card counter might be monitoring all the frequencies." "Well, if she was, she definitely would have heard us a while earlier," Mirage added, seeming to be as bored as the short redhead. "And speaking of which, why couldn't we get some scopes too?" Jack gave a nervous smile. "It was only meant for just me and Ace?" The one-eyed patch hero gave a frown in return for the one Mirage that was giving him. "Don't look at me like that. It's not like we're expected to have this many people in our hideout." "Explains why the fridge was near empty," the Wrangler chimed in, giving a small burp. Ace Assassin put a hand onto the receiver in the ear. She's right, though. We still don't know what those guys are capable of doing. So let's keep quiet. Yeah, wait, hold on. The line was silent as Mirage paused for some reason. With the trio, the trickster was squinting his eyes, what looked to be a silhouette on the roof of the main building. However, without any proper visual aids, he couldn't tell what it was. There's something on the roof, near the windows. Everyone else raised their eyebrows in confusion. Ace brought up the binoculars to spot Mirage was talking about, spotting three dark figures near the window. There was something giving a bright glint of the front of the window. Zooming in, Ace flinched a little as he watched Queen of Diamonds working to cut a hole in the glass on the surface. Using a few shards like a buzzsaw, it created a bright light that illuminated her with seconds at a time. Royal Flush and Card Counter waited patiently with her. At least Card Counter was. Royal Flush was moving her mouth and gesturing the words with her pipe wrench. No doubt just wanted to smash the window. However, Queen gave her twin a glare before saying something that Ace would only guess was about her finishing her work. Seconds later, the jewel overpopped the large piece of glass from the window and paused it for a moment to gloat. Wedging it in front of the plumber, Card Counter then muttered something to them before they both went on. The twins exchanging looks means one another before following suit. Putting a hand on the receiver, that was Queen, Flush, and Counter. If I had to guess, they're probably on surrounding Willie's group before they start a fight. Deuce tapped on the rocket on her hand to ensure that the warhead wasn't damaged, then turned sideways and gave it the casual inspection. So what do we do now? I'm somewhat thinking about blowing the whole place up, Mad Bomber chuckled. He quickly felt a sharp pain to the back of his head, promptly turning to glare at the 7-year-old while rubbing the sore spot. We're not doing that. Oh, come on, it'll be fun. Plus, splintered wood makes really good defense. We can hear you both, you know, Jack's voice cut in. No one asked you, Jack, both kids asked in illusion. Ace scanned down between the buildings again. He weighed his options, hoping to spot any of the members of the Full House sneaking around. One idea was to let the girls take on Willie and his crew before Ace's group moved on to deal with them. Wildcard Willie always had a lot of henchmen under his control, and with that being really easygoing, or whatever his standards were, while Ace didn't doubt the Full House's ability to handle themselves, he hoped that this meeting did lead to a brawl. Their opponents would even have less stamina to deal with someone up to their caliber. However, this may not take a difference as Willie's goons were never much of a challenge to begin with. Even someone like Deuce, without her launcher that is, would mop up the floor and would have plenty of energy to chase down their boss. Unfortunately, every time the gang managed to Willie behind bars, they had learned why he called himself the wild card. At some point during his sentence, he escaped custody one way or another. Sometimes it was just a few hours, then a few days, a week, or at so best, but never over a month. And every time it came up on the news with the guards, it had a different story as to how it happened. Ace didn't know whether the stories were true or the guards were just trying to save their own butts, but he started to think that no prison could hold that man. It would even become a little game for Ace and Jack, where they make belts and see how long it'd take for an old man to burst out again. The rest of the Full House shared their frustrations about this, but Ace figured that he could always catch him later, right? And yet there was a line he was thinking that would lead up to this moment. The girls want a permanent solution to the city's problems, and given how badly beaten Card Shark was, Ace didn't have any doubts that they were intended to do the same to Willie. The white-haired hero grimaced a bit as he was disgusted with the thought. It often said you can't be a good hero unless you have principles, and Lincoln had 3. 1. Never harm the innocent. 2. He would never kill anyone. 3. He refused to badly injure the elderly. Card Shark was in his 20s, but Willie was old enough to be Lincoln's grandfather. Just felt too immortal to beat the old man's teeth with. Which is why Ace opted to catch him with hope that eventually someone would find a way to keep him contained. Willie doesn't put up much of a fight once you corner him anyways. It was also clear that the second moral that left them pretty much at the odds with Ace Assassin when they crossed paths. Ace then jolted a bit when he felt his soft punch to the shoulder. Come on, Lamo, it's still your call, Ace Assassin chided. So sorry, the boy quickly replied. Ace narrowed his gaze before giving a heavy sigh. I have no idea, but it may not be the best one. How so? 'Cause I don't want to give the Full House any more of a reason to paint me as a villain. But at the same time, I can't let them pounce on Willie like they did with Card Shark. Plus, I think they might just kill him if we don't intervene. Not just that it would be a bad thing, Ace Assassin muttered. She smirked a bit with the scowl that Savvy was giving her. Oh, come on, I'm only joking. He's a bit too fun to have around. Isn't that much of a threat? Besides, I already know about your moral code, since you kept breathing on it down my neck back then. I'm just not comfortable with it, you know, especially after Ace paused, trailing off as he had a solemn stare at the street below. That day at the mall, Ace Assassin dropped the teasing attitude at the mention of that incident, and she remembered that day clearly. Not only it was on the news for weeks, but her mom was working double time during the treating those injuries. It seems like every once a year or so, some nutjob decides that he wants to shoot a bunch of people who were supposed wrongdoings when they were only during their lives. Lincoln still doesn't know what equates to kill a bunch of innocents. But he didn't dare try to question though through the process of a madman, as he knew he would never understand them. Officially, that event was referred to as the Black Friday Massacre. Many adults and children looking to get the best deals on what offered suddenly found themselves fighting for their lives as a couple of former military guys with PTSD, after lived through a full life of hardships and trauma, came in the automatic weapons and started gunning down people left-right. The Monster Chaos were Rita, Lincina, Lincoln, and Lily. The rest of the girls were either with their friends buying, or busy, or had ordered stuff online to avoid the hustle at the mall. But Lincoln wanted to get some discount merchandise, and Lily needed to be looked after since no one would be at home. The soul male loud flashed back to the moment where his life had changed forever. As he ran for cover, Rita took the bullet to the back and almost fell over on top of her infant daughter. Lynn quickly ushered his children to safety before he was doing the same with his wife. Unfortunately, he had took a lot of bullets to his chest in his trouble. Lincoln immediately screamed for his father while Lily cried in his arms, only to witness that one of the killers walk up to his crying mother and promptly silence her with a bullet to her head. The kids would have met their end as well if it hadn't been timely intervention of the SWAT team member shooting down the killer at the back of the vest, forcing him to run. The Loud parents were just 2 out of the 98 people that were killed that day, which included 19 children. I know my sisters took it pretty hard when they found out, but they weren't in the middle of it. Ace had spoken in a whisper, gazing up at the dark sky. I wonder how my parents must feel seeing their kids fighting like this, and not being able to tell us to knock it off. He then drew a heated breath as his eyes furrowed. For a while after that day, after child protection failed to separate us, I was scared and uncertain about what would happen from then on out. I know SWAT killed one of the murderers, but then the other one who killed him was still out there. And then he got caught after 2 months and was sentenced to life in prison. We both know that, Ace Assassin replied, taking a seat at the edge of the roof. Oof. You also told me on how you wish you could kill the guy while he was still in holding. She then gazed from his prone form. But you didn't want it to at the end, did you? No, Ace blinked, a stray tear away. I decided it might be better just to let justice do its thing. Like you said, he was given a life sentence, which made me mad. But then when I heard someone stabbed him in the back of his head only a week to his sentence, yeah, he had it coming anyway. Even you started doing your job as a hero a while before then. You were willing to kill him back then, but never say you wanted to stop thinking that. Asen looked directly into the girl's eyes. It's because I've realized that I have enough bloodshed to last me for a lifetime. I just can't stomach doing anything to someone else. Why do you think we had a rocky start? Because you kept encouraging it. And the reason why you're okay with it? Ace Assassin upholster one of her pistols with a second, twirling around by the trigger hole until it stopped moving, then pointed to the clouds. Is I punish the guilty. The loopholes to those morals you have no, just so you know, you may not do the same thing for anything others as well. Ace nodded slowly. The full house refused to do the same thing as the moral code, but they have already broke 2 of them recently. I wouldn't be here right now if it weren't for Clyde and Lily. The boy gave it a hardened glare at the main building. I'm not going to let them break the last one. You okay there, partner? You've been quiet for a couple of minutes, a wrangler pulled out. I'm fine. Ace took a brief pause. Now you listen closely, my guys. My sisters have the abilities that may either give you an advantage or make you find next to them impossible. So before spring our trap, I'm going to assign who gets to deal who. You sure we can't just talk this out with them? Jack questioned nervously. Ace then gave a heavy sigh. If it was that easy, then we wouldn't be doing this. But I have a good feeling they'd do the same if I showed up out of nowhere. Ace's assassin pulled the barrel back, making sure the round was chambered. What a fun night this will be, she half joked, before putting the safety on. Wildcard Willie held a grin underneath his facial mask as he watched his minions carefully disassemble the important pieces of the machinery before hollowing them onto the trucks parked near the back of the factory. Just beyond the double-wide steel door, several tracer trailers had their cargo holds open for transport. With the pace they were going, Willie hoped that they could grab what they needed before the full house showed up. They always had a bad habit of ruining his schemes, those darn kids. But he thought his enemies weren't worse as they were drawing his ire, but a pair of grunts clumsily floundering about a particularly large machine. Careful with that merchandise, boys! I want that new cabin to look like a mansion instead of some rundown motel where those contractors get their butts working on it. Easy for you to say, one of them spat in pained retort. This thing's heavy. The grunt's partner decided to take the moment to shift his position to a bit of ease and the strain on his fingers. This immediately caused them to uphold their unbalance, forcing the two to run around on the floor in an attempt to keep away the heavy device steady. This nearly they collided with a few other flunkies, trying to move their own equipment, before coming to a halt with one grunt, all but smashed against the wall. What did you say? I just say, Willie yelled out. Yeah. The grunt pulled down the device free from his partner. Remember, I ain't playing ya until you get yourselves killed, the boss uttered in the distance. Maybe I should have just went back to college, one of the grunts near the main door muttered. Same here, Mac, another added. Right as they were about to exit, the heavy door suddenly came down, slamming shut with a deafening sound. Hey, what's with the door? Wasn't me, shouted a grunt at the controls. He moved the lever, but for some reason it wouldn't budge. Darn it, this thing is stuck. He then tried the other controls, only to have the panels short out. Now the stupid thing is fried. Turning his attention towards his ear. What did you idiots do now? Willie shouted. Hang on a sec. The grunt replied as he banged the console with the wrench. It started to flicker before it came back to life, which he pulled over the lever down. The door slowly creaked open as the grunts picked up their equipment. Once the door was fully open, however, they were met with a certain musician and her guitar and speakers at the ready. Behind her, several goons lied unconscious in various positions. Congratulations, dude! You dudes got a front row at the seat to the encore. Before the two could drop their load, Nightclub played an extremely loud riff that blasted them several yards into the facility. What in tarnation? Willie muttered as he watched the two blackneys fly into the conveyor belt. Looking at the back door, his face went from confusion to dull look. Oh, great, it's one of you brats. He turned to the others. Don't just stand here, get her! The rest of the grunts soon took notice and immediately began to pull out guns, whatever metallic pieces of machinery they could use as weapons. Nightclub wasn't at least a bit imitated, waiting for her prey to get close enough, before enough to force them risk permanent hearing damage. She enjoyed playing another metallic riff, forcing even those attempting to draw on bead to head her over their ears. Some of them came to a stop, unable to bear the assault on their ears. A fashionable heroine swung with a cheer, kicking those closest to the nightclub into the wall. 11 of Hearts swung back for a second swipe, forcing more to evade the other into each other. This proved to be such an effective distraction that left her rear guard open, allowing the mechanical 6-year-old to sneak around and locate the main water pipe on the wall. Tapping it with a wrench, Royal Flush gingerly poked it for a weak spot. She grinned wickedly, and then felt a dull in the metal. "Hey, uglies!" she called out, making the grunts and with earshot on Guerleron's back. "Thought you looked thirsty." Flush then struck up at the pipe with great force, busting it open and letting torrents of water gush from the breach. The torrent continued until the lack of pressure caused the water to become nothing more than an steady flow. Several grunts were floored with the flash flood, but those weren't affected were flooding trained with their guns on the lone hero. The smirk on Flush's face dropped upon realizing the dangerous position she put herself in. Seconds before they started shooting, Strawn's suit dropped down with a slab of concrete twice her size, jamming it onto the floor as bullets failed to penetrate the makeshift barrier. The 6-year-old recoiled instinctively, only relaxing when she realized that none of the bullets were hitting her. "Thanks. Try not to get shot this time," Strawn's suit smirked, before tearing a piece of piping out of the wall, flattening into a disc. She then tossed it like a frisbee. The metal object was like a flying buzzsaw that at the speed was rotating. The grunts immediately ducked to avoid getting decapitated. Although their guns weren't so fortunate, each one of the cut at the middle like a hit knife through a butter, and the disc kept going until it stuck itself into the side of another machine. No longer under fire, the athletic heroine performed her signature of charge attacks, bowling over any enemy that was on her way. Stronsu made a cheesy grin for her as enemies flew by with every inch of the way if it was weightless. "Oh yeah, ain't nothing going to take down Stronsu," the brunette cheered as she started doing her little victory dance. Due to this, the strong-armed hero didn't realize that there was a grunt speeding towards her with a forklift. The Moog laughed evilly to himself, but thinking he'd get an easy kill. And such act tunnel visions weren't what usually wound up getting yourself killed. One jewel-powered 6-year-old stood one of the catwalks above the production line, frowning at the scene below her, crossing her arms in an X formation. Queen of Diamonds closed her eyes as multiple shards formed in front of her circle formation. Once she was certain that she had made enough, the Queen locked her eyes on the target before thrusting her hands forward, sending the shards accelerating through towards the unsuspecting flunky. As soon as he got within 20 yards of Strawn's suit, the shards impaled the engine compartment as well as 2 tires, forcing the forklift to spin out of control. Didn't help the door was partially flooded from Flush's stunt. Strawn's suit stopped herself praised just in time to see the vehicle fly past her and smashed into a 30-feet compressor. Already steam of air licked from the damaged machine while the driver passed down on the wheel. "Stop, you showboating idiot!" Queen yelled from above. The young teen just gave a shrug. "I'm not apologizing." Upon noticing they were getting surrounded, the large group of grunts dispersed to deal with the threats. The tactical error was to come. They had yet to notice a few more members of the Full House were unaccounted for, only to find out the hard way when several mooks fell into the pre-dug pit in the direction. A few feet were smashed onto the floor by a massive, well-placed jack-in-the-box hiding behind a massive pile of logs. Willie, who kept herself hidden from the skirmish, couldn't help but bring a hand to his forehead in frustration. This was supposed to be an easy job. He gave a little shrug. I'll find some new recruits soon enough. He then turned the tail and made a beeline for an exit. This didn't go unnoticed by an ever-watchful eye of Card Counter, who was monitoring everyone's position, though through the security cameras being shown on her tablet. From her position on the separate catwalk high above the main floor, she could call out for any enemies that were in the camera's view. Her tablet was connected to a control panel, where she then traced her fingers over the circuit breakers that control the individual lighting circuits of the building. "Hi, Card. Wiley is making a break for the western emergency exit." "Don't worry, he won't get far," the oldest member spoke in a firm tone on the mic. Willie managed to make it to a large storage room filled with various cutting tools, spotting an exit door just on the other side. Smirking to himself, he knew that he could once again be able to make a clean getaway before those brats even realized he was missing. While he was a bit sore at having to put his home plans on hold, at least some would be time to enact this scheme. Hopefully, without interference, having a ton of mooks to cover your ass sure had its perks. Plus, he didn't even need to pay them any more now that they were certain to get jailed. When Willie got halfway through the room, the lights suddenly turned off. Confused, he slowed to a stop. "Wait, what in the?" was all the man could get out, before receiving a swift blow to the jaw sent him to the floor. Seconds later, he then felt his arms being bound behind him of what he assumed was a cable from one of his shelves. Then he felt himself by hit getting dragged over to the wall by unceremoniously slammed into it. Although he couldn't see who he was dealing with at the time, he had a very good guess on who it was. "Very clever, eh, Savvy?" Willie spat venomously. "Wait till I try moseying you on before spraying out the trap, eh?" A very dark chuckle that didn't sound like anything like the person he was expecting to greet him. It sounded like much more older and feminine. "Please, that little traitor will say anything hiding if he knows what's good for him." The light suddenly flickered to life, temporarily blinding the man. Once his vision was corrected, Willie stared back and grinning at High Card, who was fiddling with the machine in her hand. High Card, the one and only now. Her eyes became beaded behind her mask. "What were you planning to do with all those machines? I doubt it was some for little project." "What? An old man like me can't build a nice home for himself to get away from you crazy people? Or to build a new hideout secret, but it doesn't matter now since you won't be needing it anyway." The teen began to twirl the blade in her hands. "So what, you're just going to hand me over to the choppers?" He stifled a laugh. "Haven't you all forgotten through your dead heads that yours no prison can hold me forever?" High Card nodded. "True, you can cheat the system." She then repositioned the blade before forcibly tilting Willie's head upwards. Then she moved the machete to be an inch from his neck. "But can you cheat death?" Willie gulped as High Card started to press the sharp edge on his neck. Now hold on. I thought you folks didn't kill no one." "What can I say? We literally had a change of arrangement." The teen grinned evilly. "You've been such a problem so far since Wildcard. Now it's time for you to fold permanently." And as they were neither High Card or Wildcard noticed a lone figure drop from the skylight. Just as the blonde was about to draw blood, a young masculine scream yelled out from behind, before High Card suddenly found an arm constricted against her throat. Grasping from the sudden cut off of air, the heroine was forced to remove herself from Willie as she thrashed around to get the assailant off. Having one of her free of his own body once again, Willie snapped his head down to see an odd sight. Ace Savvy was clinging onto High Card's back, holding on to his chokehold position as the older hero grew angrier by the second. "Huh? I thought them rumors about Ace Savvy's screwy were a big bag of farts," Willie muttered to himself. High Card could feel herself beginning to suffer from oxygen starvation, so she started doing everything she could to loosen the attacker from her neck. She tried to reach behind her to stab her attacker, but the assailant quickly grabbed the machete, banged her head against the shelf, forcing her to drop it. With the main weapon gone, High Card resorted into crashing back first onto the shelves, so she could hear her attacker grunting in pain. But they refused to give her as the person tightened her hold on with her neck. Willie watched as the two collided onto the wall, next to him, which happened to be several saw blades hung above. His eyes widened when one fell loose, aimed directly at his head. The old man shut his eyes tight, thinking this was the end of his life, when he heard something being cut. Instead of the feeling of the searing pain that one could feel when having their head cut open, he felt his arms slacken a bit with no physical pain to himself. Open an eye and deducing he was still alive to the full house, 2 members fighting each other away. Willie instinctively moved his hands to find the table and cable that was cut clean in 2. Doing a quick spot check, the old man whistled to himself awkwardly as he executed himself from the scene. Excused himself. The 2 combatants never noticed him walk out of the door. Highcard started to feel her vision become clouded and dark, but still had enough fight in her to pull one last-ditch effort. Lowering her chin just enough she could feel her fabric just inches from her lips. Opening her mouth, she bit down hard on the arm, making the attacker cry out in pain. The hold slack tad was just enough she was looking for, reaching the limb from her high neck. Highcard flipped the advisory over her back, slammed them onto the floor. The blonde took a deep breath, then massaged the back of her neck. Looking down, her face became red with rage. "You!" Ace moaned in pain as he sat up, holding the bite marks on his costume. As he turned to face his sister, a boot kicked directly right in his chin, causing him to make another cry escape him. "You just had to get in the way, didn't you?" Rubbing his jawline. "I had to, Highcard. I couldn't let you kill him." He gagged a little as Highcard was grabbed by the neck, hoisting him into the air so he could see the intense burning in her eyes. "It's not the right thing to do," Ace choked out, trying to pry her hands loose. You know that." "Things change, Ace, and you clearly haven't learned from your mistake." Highcard tightened her grip a bit more. With Ace kicking his feet wildly, he started to gasp for air. "You know we already lied to the media about you turning to a villain, but when they heard you helped Card Willie escape," the teen grinned smugly at him. "I'm sure they'll have a nice little cell waiting for a little bastard like you." Ace would have taken offense to that, but he couldn't help but feel that something was off about Laurie's eyes. The irises were noticeably different in color, almost yellowish. Instead of the typical blue, it was somewhat faded, and it was like you could tell Laurie was still there, but at the same time she wasn't. Highcard's grip loosened a bit on his neck as she activated her comms. Her lips curled into the frown. "Card counter. Willie got away." She grinned wickedly at the 11-year-old. "But I got the boy responsible." "Understood, and I have a feeling he might show himself. Anyway, the rest of Willie's men have been dealt with, so bring him out, please," Card counter stated. Ace did his best to clear his throat after having loosened on Highcard's grip a little. "Is this what you really want, Laurie?" He then spat out heatedly, catching the teen off guard with the use of her real name. The white-haired hero didn't want to pull this card, but he felt like he had to. "Do you think Mom and Dad would be proud of this?" The boy watched as Laurie's eyes brightened up for a few seconds, as if it was contemplating his words. However, they faded back to their original state and brought out the angry teen with it. "Bring them close?" "It doesn't matter what they think. They're long gone by now." Her voice carried a hint of depression for a brief second. "But I don't believe Mom and Dad would be happy knowing their only son has turned life into of crime." Clicked. "Why don't you take a good thing? How long you mirror your highness?" A voice spoke behind them. Turning, Highcard was greeted with the famed Hispanic girl, pointing her pistol at her. "I'm only going to say this once. Drop him now," Ace Assassin ordered. The blonde gave a confused and uninterested look in return. "And just what the heck are you?" "Well," the sharpshooter shrugged. "I asked nicely." Before any of the louds could react, the Ace Assassin pulled the trigger. A bullet went through Highcard's forearm before making a clean exit on the other side. The teen gave a shrill scream as she dropped her brother on the ground, holding her injured limb. Both kids seized the chance to run deeper into the factory, as that gunshot likely alerted everyone else. "Guys!" Ace panted, rubbing his throat. "We're gonna need some backup!" He then turned to Ace Assassin with a glare. "And did you really have to shoot her? We both know she couldn't care who I was and just treat me like an enemy. Besides, I gave us a head start," Ace Assassin retorted. Highcard glared at the direction she fought back a few tears. "You two are literally dead for this!" her voice carried off after them. On the moonlit roof, Deuce gave a wide grin hearing Ace's call. "Thought you may say that." The 7-year-old was situated in the prone position as she peered out through the skylight, carefully lining up the full house in her sights. A few girls had started to move towards the back to investigate, so Deuce figured that she'd have to act fast in order to keep them separated. Though through her scope, the Rocketeer spotted the Queen of Diamonds cautiously walking to the catwalk a couple of stories down. "Hope you guys enjoy this present, sister," Deuce uttered smugly before pulling the trigger. Queen of Diamonds flinched upon hearing the sound of motor running, which was getting louder and louder by half-second. Twisting around, the 6-year-old was met with a familiar sight of 2 green-colored rockets flying directly towards her. Knowing what was about to happen, "No!" Her screams were quickly replaced with fits of coughing and gagging as a cloud of gas enveloped around her. Queen stumbled upon the platform, trying to find a way out. Over to tumble a railing. "Ah!" 11 of Hearts turned down the screams, nearly letting out one of herself as she saw her sister fall. "Don't worry, I'll get you." Flinging a sash outward, it wrapped around the steel beam of the ceiling, tugging it to ensure it was secure. 11 swung in the path that would allow her to intercept her teammate. Just before she could reach Queen, however, she felt the rope loose all the tension as a loud explosion rocked the facility. 11 screamed as she fell onto the floor, her yells being cut short as she slid onto her stomach a couple of feet before coming to a stop. The 16-year-old all felt the air did leave her chest as Queen landed on her back. "Thanks for the save," the younger blonde groaned out. "No problem," 11 wheezed, watching the end of her sash come down. To her dismay, it looked like it had burn marks on it. It looked at the ceiling and showed a few residential fires on the beam she tried to use. Her brows knotted together as rage began to overtake their initial shock. "Who blew up my sash?" "There's plenty more where that came from," Mad Bomber chuckled to himself, lying adjacent to where Deuce was positioned. "Are you two all right? What happened?" Card Counter's voice echoed through the comms. Queen growled as she touched the receiver. "Deuce just blew me off the ceiling," she yelled. To the 14-year-old cringed a bit. "When I find that poop-throwing Philistine, I am going to shove one of those rockets down her throat." When she got off, 11 started to make her way back to the upper levels. "Right, well, be that as it may, and advise that Ace is on the loose in the facility with an unknown complicants. Should know they encountered them, subdued them really quickly," the prodigy finished, swiping off the screen of her tablet as she checked the camera. "Should you find whatever hooligan that caused that explosion." Card Counter muttered as the last part to herself. "Did you make that noise, nightclub?" Joker asked over the comms. The musician shook her head as she responded, holding her guitar in one hand. "Nah, sis, but I kinda wish I did," she half-joked. Suddenly a metal rope came flying down from the door behind her. It silently wrapped around the neck of her guitar before the owner tugged it violently towards them, feeling her weapon leave her grasp. "What the?" Nightclub turns to find her axe in the hands of someone kid dressed like a cowboy. "Evening, madam." Wrangler tipped his hat towards her. "Not cool, dude," Nightclub growled, stomping over to the young man. "Please give me back my axe." Wrangler gave a smug grin under his facial bandana. "Y'all didn't say please." The 15-year-old narrowed her eyes as well as she stepped just outside the main door. "It wasn't even yours to begin with in the first place." The musician then felt something heavy dropped onto her back, forcing her face first onto the ground. She grunted in pain before she felt one of her arms being folded to the back of her. Lifting her head up a bit, Nightclub caught a glimpse of the one-eye-patched individual who she all knew too well. "Sorry about this, Nightclub, but it's all for your own good," One-Eye Jack stated firmly, pushing her arm up further. "Get off of me, you useless lackney!" Nightclub shouted as she started to thrash around, kicking her feet every now each of the way while rolling to get Jack to release his grip. Once she rolled over onto her back, Nightclub used her feet to push her along with the ground in order to grind him off. However, she couldn't move as it was too much before the Wrangler threw his lasso at her feet. With a heavy pull, he stopped her momentum altogether. This allowed Jack to reverse the position and plant her flat on her stomach once more before shoving her face into the dirt. Jack shook the soil out of his hair, not caring that his glasses were out of alignment. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Nightclub. We don't want to have to hurt you. That's a shame because I don't share those sentiments, the monotonous voice called out, spooking the two boys them. Wrangler then looked behind him, just as Spade was swinging towards his face. He yelped out and ducked the seconds later. As his hat was getting swatted off his head, eight of spades swung again, forcing the cowboy to lean back as he fell to his ear. Whoa there! The 8-year-old then jumped to deliver a heavy hitter, making Wrangler release his lasso to scoop backwards. He headed for the spade to impact on the ground with a small dust cloud. Easy with that thing. Just hold still. It will be quick. 8 spoke evenly, giving her weapon a small twirl before raising it again. Wrangler then moved his leg just a few inches as the shovel dug itself into the dirt. Then she swung the second time. Wrangler managed to catch it before growling through his teeth while attempting to wrestle out of the shovel off her hands. Nightclub didn't know what was going on outside of hearing 8's voice, and she was getting sick of having to eat dirt for the rest of their last minutes. Lifting her head, the rocker spotted her guitar lying out near one of the trucks. Turning her head slightly, she saw that Jack was a little preoccupied with watching Wrangler and 8 fighting over with her shovel. Newfound determination overcame the rocker as she bucked unexpectedly, managing to bop Jack off her back. Quickly getting to her feet, Nightclub started bunny hopping towards her weapon, only to yelp as she fell on her stomach again due to her being pulled from under her. Jack was holding on to the rope that partially immobilized her, but Nightclub was proving to be stronger than expected. She slowly clawed her way towards the instrument, hoping to settle the score once and for all.